Star Trek has been woke since its inception and tackling queer issues with metaphors and queer coded characters since the 80s in Star Trek The Next Generation. But with the advent of Star Trek Discovery, things got even queerer and moved past allegories and metaphors, with the series introducing its first canonically gay male and non metaphorically trans characters, as well as including more bi women and lesbians to add to those we met earlier in this series when we covered Deep Space Nine. Hi, and welcome to Admiral Cat's Trek Quest, your new home for progressive reviews and deep dive analyses of all things Star Trek. And in this video, we'll be analyzing the queer history of Star Trek Discovery. Paul Stamets is Star Trek's first canonically gay male character. He's introduced in Season 1, Episode 3, Context is for Kings, as the USS Discovery's gloriously bitchy chief engineer, and I love that in this episode, they never make any mention that he's gay. They leave it up to your gaydar, which should detect it anyway unless it's broken, but definitely not in an overdone or campy way. And I feel like much of the strength of this depiction comes from the fact that they chose not only a gay actor, but a gay icon among actors, Anthony Rapp, to play the character. This is so great because for a long time, gay male characters in TV shows weren't necessarily played by gay men and were often played for laughs. NBC's Will and Grace comes to mind as a prime example of this. Neither of the gay main characters were played by gay men. A lot of non queer people act like it's overly picky for gay people to want gay characters to be played by gay actors and trans characters to be played by trans actors, but the brilliance of this depiction, when compared to all the times I've seen straight men playing gay men, affirms my opinion that it actually is really important. When they introduce his partner, Dr. Hugh Culber, for the first time in Season 1, Episode 4, The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, played by another openly gay actor, Wilson Cruz, again, they don't tell you they're partners, they show you in their very first scene together with their bickering over whether Stamets' frontal lobe, where feelings are located, is important enough for Culber to fret over. You can clearly tell this is a gay couple without anyone having to beat you over the head with it or come right out and say it. It's a depiction which normalizes male homosexuality as just part of our two main characters, as opposed to making it a special theme or acting like we have to talk about it all the time as something special or unusual or create any conflict around their homosexuality. Even the ship's Captain Lorca, arguably the man's man of the show, is clearly not uncomfortable or homophobic about it in the least. We are treated to a future where homophobia either doesn't exist anymore, or is at least so rare that not even a character who is clearly meant to be at least conservative enough to always be complaining about being surrounded by wide eyed scientists instead of soldiers is fazed by it. Okay, technically he's an evil mirror universe doppelganger of the original Captain Lorca, but you get the idea. In Season 1, Episode 5, Choose Your Pain, we are treated to another cute romantic scene in which we see the couple brushing their teeth together. I love this choice because it's a cute, non sexual thing that a lot of couples do before bed. And while it's great for shows to reference and depict gay sexual relations in an equal way to straight sex and help normalize that aspect of gay relationships, showing gay characters in less sexualized and more cute romantic contexts helps to humanize the characters a bit more and reinforce this normalization by fighting back against the homophobic myth that gay relationships are purely about sexual pleasure, which can unfortunately be reinforced when that's the only part of gay love a show focuses on, which has been a part of the problematic nature of many of the earlier depictions of gay characters in TV and film. I love it, and in this scene they go further to show how in sync the couple is. Earlier in the episode, acting Captain Saru had demanded Stamets to revive and further injure a giant space tardigrade, which had been reduced to a traumatized catatonic state from being used as the biological navigation system for the Discovery's displacement activated spore hub drive over Culber's vehement objection. After Stamets agrees to the captain's orders, the couple share a brief look in which so much is communicated. The acting here is so on point, and in the end, he chooses to inject himself with a tardigrade DNA compound so that he can take over at considerable risk as the Spore Drive's navigator instead, because, as he explains to his partner during the toothbrushing scene, he knew he'd leave him if he further injured the tardigrade. Culber replies, "Oh, so you do listen to me," to which Stamets answers, "Not really. You sold that with a look." It's an adorable moment and speaks volumes to how connected the couple is. I love it. This depiction hasn't always been perfect. At the tail end of season 1, episode 10, Despite Yourself, Culber is sadly killed by Volk, a Klingon spy who has been physically altered and brainwashed into the identity of Starfleet Lieutenant Ash Tyler when his underlying identity breaks through. It was incredibly disappointing, even though it served a story purpose, as it's extremely common for gay characters to be killed in film and TV depictions, especially when it serves to create emotional drama for another character. It's so common, in fact, that there's a trope named after it called Bury Your Gays. This sparked an outrage in the fandom, however, and stories differ on whether the character was originally intended to come back or not in Season 2, Episode 5, Saints of Imperfection. Actor Wilson Cruz has expressed that he wasn't given any inclination that the character would be returning at all, but in response to the fan outrage, the Discovery team made a promise that they were bringing him back, and they made good on it, as he is rediscovered in the mycelial network, a subspace dimension full of sentient fungi the Discovery's spore drive allows it to travel through, and is reconstituted into a new body. Even with this minor imperfection, the depiction remains solid, interesting, and story driven. Whereas they could have immediately brought the characters back together romantically, the writers instead decided to have Culber suffer from a realistic case of post traumatic identity crisis. He had died and come back. His body was entirely new. He didn't know who he was or what he felt or why anything should matter to him for quite some time. While Stamets was understandably overjoyed to have him back, Holber just couldn't reciprocate while he was dealing with all of this baggage. He needed time and space to rediscover himself and even put in for a transfer to the Enterprise. But at the end of season 2, in episode 14, Such Sweet Sorrow, part 2, when the Discovery is forced to travel to the future in order to save it from the dangerous rogue AI Control, which threatens to end all life in the galaxy, Culber saves Stamets from a life threatening injury. He has discovered that he finally knows where his home is, at least, even if he still has a fair share of trauma from his death experience to work through in the remainder of the series. And that home is with Paul. And they travel to the future together, where they even become an adoptive family of sorts to a set of great trans characters we'll discuss later in this video, and they excel at it. Overall, they're just really well written and portrayed characters and mark an excellent transition from Star Trek's history of queer allegory into actual queer depiction. Season 2, Episode 1, Brother, introduces us to Discovery's third canonically queer character in the form of Jet Reno. An incredibly multi talented lesbian engineer with a diverse background ranging from bartending to book smuggling and a penchant for munching on black licorice literally everywhere she goes, Reno is rescued from the downed medical frigate USS Hiawatha by the Discovery's crew under the new leadership of Captain Christopher Pike. In spite of being an engineer by trade, we learn that she's managed to keep the survivors of the crash alive for an outstandingly impressive 10 months and 11 days awaiting rescue, simply by thinking of the body as just another machine and reading a lot. She's smart, snarky, funny, and loves giving Stamets the business as seen in Season 2, Episode 4 in O Ball for Charon, among other episodes when she refers to the spores that power the spore drive as mushrooms she'd pick off her pizza. And although she hides it behind ostensibly just needing to get her co-engineer functioning at full capacity again, and before that having a hangnail, she does genuinely care for Paul and Hugh, and even plays a role in helping them to see that they were meant to be together after Culber's trauma before they get back together at the end of season 2. In the relevant episode, Season 2, Episode 12, Through the Valley of Shadows, we learn that Rena was apparently married to a particularly nitpicky Soyuzian who drove her crazy with micromanaging, including a list of rules for apparel for guests under 10, non denominational shuttle parking, and vegan steak when planning their wedding. Sadly, we learn that her wife, whose ring she still wears, passed during the Klingon War. This is used as a stark reminder to Culber that people like us always find people like them, and thank God. She reminds him that he has a second chance, warning him not to screw it up. I love this scene because up until this point, it hasn't been made blatant in any dialogue that she's even a lesbian. If your gaydar didn't catch it before from legendary lesbian comedian slash actress Tig Notaro's excellent portrayal, then it again might be broken. But this solidifies it, and again, no one acts like it's some big deal or like, whoa, wife, you're a lesbian? We are again treated to a future where homosexuality and homoromanticism are normalized, as probably more people than some conservatives might think really believe they already should be today. We don't get to see her in a relationship again until the newer series Starfleet Academy, in which we find her dating the hard-ass Klingon Jem'Hadar cadet master Laura Thok, which leads to some really cute and endearing moments with them. I'll talk more about that when the series finishes and I'm able to do a full video on it, but needless to say, it's nice to see her with someone again after the tragedy of losing her first wife in the war. Overall, I think it's a solid, well rounded, realistic depiction, and it again serves the character well that she's played by an actual gay woman. While we never see her romantically or sexually involved in Discovery, I actually find that kind of refreshing. It's nice to have depictions of gay characters that don't focus explicitly on some kind of taboos or even just drama around sex or relationships at all because it's humanizing. It helps to show that gay people are multifaceted and not just defined by who we love, but by who we are as whole human beings, independent of having to be attached to a partner. She's an important character on her own. She saves the day on multiple occasions with her know how, and most of the time she's just kind of there, dishing out snark, taking names, being a mentor, and of course, eating black licorice in engineering because it's, as she says, candy, not a food, really more of an accessory, and I'm pretty sure I have a crush on her. We've talked about mirror universe bisexuality before in my video on the queer history of Deep Space Nine, and it's back again in Discovery. For the latter half of season 1, we find the crew of the Discovery stranded in the Mirror Universe, ostensibly by a malfunction in the Spore Drive's navigation system or Stamets' inability to hold coordinates in his head after a ridiculous number of jumps in short succession made in season 1, episode 9, Into the Forest I Go. In reality, all of this supposition about how they got there was just a smokescreen to conceal that Captain Lorca, who was really the evil Mirror Lorca all along, was just using the jumps to calculate a way to get back to his home universe anyway. Regardless, while stuck there, Michael Burnham finds herself face to face with the ruthless Terran Empire's faceless emperor, who is none other than that universe's Philippa Georgiou, the doppelganger of the captain Burnham betrayed and mutinied against in Season 1, Episode 1, The Vulcan Hello. And out of guilt for betraying her former captain, she ends up rescuing the Emperor from the downfall of her regime and brings her back to the Prime Universe with her in Season 1, Episode 13, What's Past is Prologue. This Shoujo finds a place in her new universe acting as her Prime Universe counterpart, ostensibly long presumed dead until rescued from a Klingon prison vessel, as Admiral Katrina Cornwell informs the Discovery's crew in her cover story in Season 1, Episode 14, The War Without, The War Within, and in Season 2, Episode 10, The Red Angel, by which time she has joined the mysterious, nefarious, and unsanctioned Federation Organization Section 31, we find her flirting with Stamets, to which Culber responds, "You do know that he's gay, right?" To which the deposed Emperor responds, "Don't be so binary. In my universe, he was pansexual, and we had DEF CON level fun together. And you too, Poppy." Confirming that apparently a lot of people in the Mirror Universe are pan or bi. It's just one scene, it never comes up again, but it pisses off the biphobes, and that's DEF CON level fun in and of itself. Our next example is also going to be brief. This time, it's less representation and more of an allegory, and I may be reading in, but given the wording the writers chose, it's hard to believe that they weren't trying, at least in part, to say something transpositive, so I can't just ignore it. In Season 1, Episode 1, The Vulcan Hello, we are first introduced to Volk, an albino Klingon who is a son of none, an orphaned Klingon with no house to his name. In this episode, he is uplifted from this low standing to being the new torchbearer of Klingon leader T'Kuvma's fleet. In Season 1, Episode 4, The Butcher's Knife Cares Not for the Lamb's Cry, however, he is abandoned on the derelict USS Shenzhou, the original Captain Giorgio's ship, which was damaged, evacuated, and abandoned by the Federation in the Battle of the Binary Stars by the new Klingon leader Cole. Cole initially wanted the Klingon L'Rell to execute him, but she convinces him to leave him in the grave of their enemy as a more fitting punishment. In reality, she has fallen in love with him and has other plans for him. In Season 1, Episode 5, Choose Your Pain, we are introduced to Starfleet Lieutenant Ash Tyler, ostensibly a serviceman who was captured at the Battle of the Binaries and was being held prisoner on a Klingon ship Captain Lorca is captured by and which they escape from together. But in Season 1, Episode 10, Despite Yourself, while confronting his presumed torturer and rapist, the Klingon L'Rell, she breaks his conditioning and a new personality emerges. We discover that the torture Tyler remembers was actually the repressed memories of a choha, or species reassignment protocol, in which L'Rell had Vok's body transformed to appear human, his DNA replaced, and his personality and memories overlain with those of the real Ash Tyler, who had in fact been captured in the Battle of the Binaries and later killed. Once his conditioning is broken, the two personalities find themselves at war, at risk of killing him until L'Rell is convinced by acting Captain Saru to save him by purging the Klingon identity from his brain in Season 1, Episode 12, Vaulting Ambition. I don't find that the whole story in and of itself really serves as much of a trans allegory, but towards the beginning of Season 1, Episode 14, The War Without the War Within, there are a couple of lines I can't ignore. When discussing the results of Tyler's Klingonectomy, Dr. Pollard remarks that he, by all assessments, now presents as Ash Tyler, and has no remaining signs aside from his scar tissue and broken, shortened bones of ever having been Klingon. Saru asks if he's now human or Klingon. Pollard responds, neither, both. We can't be sure, not without understanding the science behind the reassignment procedure. Saru asks how they're supposed to do that, and Pollard answers that she supposes they could start by asking him. Ash makes it clear that he still has access to Vok's memories, but it's more like someone else's life now, and he identifies himself as Ash Tyler. Restrictions are placed on him for having killed Dr. Culber when Volk's personality had broken through in the climax of the earlier episode Despite Yourself, but the crew accepts him as Tyler, and that's pretty much who he is and remains, aside from a brief stint trying to return to the role of Volk on the Klingon homeworld of Kronos in Season 2, Episode 3, Point of Light, before resuming his life as Tyler and joining Section 31. Again, I want to emphasize that the whole storyline is not a perfectly clean allegory. It's actually pretty messy to even consider it that way, as trans people have always been who they are on some level and don't really change from one identity to another, as is the case with Volk transforming from a Klingon identity into a human identity. But the uses of terms like reassignment procedure and presents as Ash Tyler, and the fact that who he presents as after these procedures ends up being just who he is for the remainder of the series would seem to present the message that trans people are who they present as, plain and simple, and we know the writers are trans positive because in season 3 we get our first canonically rather than allegorically trans Star Trek characters in the form of Gray and Adira Tall. In my previous videos in this series on queer themes in The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, we were introduced to the Trill, a race of joined humanoid aliens who pass on their memories, experiences, and personalities from lifetime to lifetime through Trill symbionts, worm like beings with long lives who form a mental connection with each new host, together becoming a new, unique personality with each joining. In The Next Generation, the trans allegory was only lightly made at the end of Season 4, Episode 23, The Host, when Trill Ambassador and Beverly Crusher's love interest, Odan, is transitioned from a male host to a female host. In Deep Space Nine, the allegory is much more direct, with the Trill main character, Jadzia Dax, constantly having her previous lifetime as a male Trill named Curzon referenced in some very transcoded ways. In Discovery, we no longer need the allegory, as this legacy is honored with two canonically trans Trill characters, or one Trill and a human with a Trill symbiont, Gray and Adira Tall. We are first introduced to Adira, a non binary human teen genius carrying a Trill symbiont, in Season 3, Episode 3, People of Earth, but it's not until Season 3, Episode 8, The Sanctuary, when we find out they're non binary when they tell Stamets that they've never really felt like a she or a her, so they prefer they or them, to which Stamets accedes. Stamets and Culber become sort of foster parents to Adira, and I love this theme of queer found family, which is something queer people often find in the real world. In Season 3, Episode 4, Forget Me Not, we are introduced to Gray, Adira's deceased trans boyfriend and former host of the Tal symbiont, as Adira connects with the memories of their symbiont for the first time on a mission to the Trill homeworld to retrieve the memories of the host before Gray, Admiral Senna Tal, in order to locate Federation headquarters. This is a very bittersweet episode. At the beginning, Adira has no memories of their life leading up to their joining, but can speak 7 languages and make Bajoran Hasperat. As the episode progresses, Adira enters communion with their symbiont, which is visualized as a mental world full of threads, which at first seem to be attacking Adira, causing pain, but we soon find that they are simply trying to connect the symbiont's memories to them, which is painful, as Adira is forced to relive all their memories of their relationship with Gray on board a generational shuttle, up to the point of Gray dying after an asteroid collides with the ship and Adira agreeing to take on the Tal symbiont. They retrieve all of the symbionts and Adira's memories, thus finding the way to Federation headquarters, and in connecting with their symbiont, Adira finds a new connection to Gray, who begins appearing to them as a sort of ghost whom only they can see and hear, but who can communicate with them seemingly as though he were still alive, and it would seem that in the symbiont he truly is. He becomes a recurring character in the series, and eventually Adira reveals his survival to Stamets in Season 3, Episode 6, Scavengers, and in Season 4, Episode 3, Choose to Live, he's brought back to the land of the living when Trill Guardian Z, who appears via hologram, assists Dr. Culber in a Jean Tara ceremony to transfer Gray's consciousness from the symbiont Tal to a synthetic positronic humanoid golem, technology first introduced in Star Trek Picard Season 1, Episode 10 at an Arcadia Ego Part 2. In the previous Discovery episode, Season 4, Episode 2, Anomaly, we are first introduced to the notion of using a golem to bring Gray back to life, and Gray notes that he'd like Culber to make some changes to the golem, including removing a mole on his hand, which he never liked and always wanted to remove, but as he notes when he was transitioning, he had bigger things to worry about, and the building of the golem becomes in itself an allegory for transition as a second chance for Gray to remake his body in the image of his choosing. Adira and Gray resume their relationship, although it becomes strained as Gray eventually leaves the Discovery to return to Trill and become a guardian or symbiont caretaker, and they go long distance, until Season 5, Episode 3, Janal, when they decide to amicably split, as their lives have taken different directions. It's nice to see a queer TV breakup that's not messy, and even better to have had the trope reversal of unburying Gray in the first place, and I really love these characters. It makes me happy to see real trans representation in my favorite series after years of allegory in DS9, and it's even better that they're played by actual trans actors. It adds strength to the performance of any queer character to have an actual queer actor playing them, as opposed to the offensive, previously seemingly standard practice of robbing queer actors of the opportunity by simply casting straight, cis actors in queer roles and somehow expecting them to portray something they have no real life experience with realistically. There are some in the modern queer Trek fandom who have complained, in spite of Discovery having actual queer characters instead of just queer coding and allegory for the first time in Star Trek, with the exceptions of a few bisexual characters, including Dax and Mirror Universe Kira in DS9, and previous references in TNG and Enterprise to Mintakan and Denobulin polyamory, respectively, that they feel as though Discovery isn't queer enough because there's, in general, a lack of allegory and special episodes specifically focusing on queer issues in their entirety. But I feel like this is a rather silly point of view, as having special episodes, allegory, and queer coding on their own was kind of an artifact of the times when earlier series were made. Queer people were much less accepted then, and you really just couldn't have open, canonically queer characters on Star Trek in those times, especially with Rick Berman running the show, even if it was often something Gene wanted while he was alive, and writing episodes of TNG like Season 1, Episode 8 Justice, which was initially written to include a love party scene featuring men with women, and men with men, which was changed by the executives to only feature men with women. I think it's easy to see that it's arguably more progressive to just include actual queer characters and not even really make a big deal of it at all, because that's the society we're aiming for and that Star Trek wishes to bring us, an era of acceptance for queer people and all the diversity of the human family, where everyone can simply be themselves without anyone making a big deal of it. If you'd like to see more videos on the queer history of Star Trek, there's a link on the left of the screen. If you'd like to support this channel, thank you. There's a link to my Patreon in the description, or if I become a partner one day, there should be a link on the screen to the right. Thanks for joining me on this Trek quest. Live long and watch Star Trek.